Okay, so that's indeed a very, very serious subject. And let's start from day one. Let's say that I got an idea, I built a product, prototype, and I'm going to meet my first potential customers. I'm going to present my product, and I fear that they're going to ask, how much does that cost? I don't know. I just built the product. I just had an idea. So is there some methodology, some science, some rules, a way to at least determine my first pricing model? So is there a way to do that? Frank, I think you're an expert in that. That's your business, no?
Yeah, that's actually truly my business or at least it has been my business for the last 20 years. So the methodology itself is quite easy to follow. You will have to do a 3-steps approach. The first one is basically to get an exhaustive mapping of the features or the characteristics of your solution. So that's usually the easiest one to do. And then as a second step, try to link your features or the characteristics of your solution or your service to the benefits of the customers. That's where it becomes sometimes a bit tricky, especially for the engineers, to make a direct link between the features and the benefits. Once this is done, obviously you want to quantify the value that you create for every single feature. So that's and then puts basically an amount of money on the value creation. Are you saving some time for your customers? Are you reducing their processing costs? Are you creating any added value for them? Once this is done, then you can put a price tag on it. But you really need to do those 3 steps to define the value creation and then to monetize it afterwards. Okay,
so you mean that the price tag is really the amount, is really the last step in determining that. It's like really more understanding the values. It's really value-based stuff for you.
Yes.
Okay,
yes.
Which means that you understand what you sell, basically, and you understand your customer.
And you understand precisely the value creation. Of course, you will also need sometimes to take into account the cost of your services, especially if it requires a lot of basically of human costs for the support services, for instance. But the development costs are not really relevant to put a price tag on your solution. But that's why you go for value pricing, and that requires to have a precise quantification of the value that you bring to your customers.
Okay, so is that how you proceeded when you took position at Shift? Is that like you knew the value of everything, and that's how you put the price tag on the product?
Hello. Yes, so I fully agree with what Franck said. What I would add up is first that you need also to select the pricing unit. That is something that is very important and depending upon who the buyers are, right? So if these are IT people, you will probably select the virtual machine, for example. If these are business people, you will need to talk their language. So talking about Shift, for example, we are in the insurance space. We sell fraud, and we are talking about claims, so we price per claim. So that is something that is really important. The other point that is important, of course, is to get a view of the value based on this unit, right? So if we talk about Shift again, in order to define the price, we looked at how much a claim represents for a client, right? So for example, typically, you need to know that a claim in France for an insurer is in average 2,000 euros, right? So how much do we want to represent as a cost versus this 1,200 euro? Do we want it to be very, very small? And then you need to compare that with the potential savings that you are going to offer to the client. So that's how we define the price.
Okay, that's interesting. And you got it. You defined that percentage like that? I mean, how did you assess the value and how much of that value, that 1,200 that you could get? It's like you just say, okay, we take 10%, we take 20%. There were market references.
We would love to, and my VC would love to too, I think. So, no, 10 to 20 is not...
I don't know, but how did you find that amount? Okay.
Today, it's less than 1%, so it's below 1%. It grew over time, right? So at some point when the company was created, the price was at a certain level, and based upon the savings we were offering to the clients, we could afford to grow the price, right? Today, the savings we offer our clients are between 2 times and 10 times the cost of our solution. So which is pretty sexy for a client.
Which means that you raise the price because you get a better understanding on the value that you created for your customer. Back to the value. Okay, so exactly. The more you had customers, the more you could assess and measure that value, which means the ROI in some way. So the more you were able to adapt the price to get closer to the value that you create.
Absolutely. And back to Franck's point, this is all about value. And this should be, the price is the last conversation you should have, and you should never lose for a price, right? If you lose for a price, this is because you've not been able to show the value. Or because you don't have value, which is another problem.
Which is another subject. Yeah. Talking about the way to price, the different way to measure the value that you create, you have a lot of startups that are very differently. Here we are on claim-based pricing model. Well-known models are seat-based, user-based, but do you see in your different startups things that are pretty creative in terms of axis dimensions for pricing the product?
Well, so first of all, I really appreciate the way Franck put the debate on the table, because the truth is, when we start discussing pricing at a board, that's exactly how it happens. Like, so how much did it cost to do this? Well, there's the server, this, how much? In the end, you end up trying to figure out what's the value. And the value is the component of 2 things. Number one, indeed, there's a question of unit. So, for example, for Shift, it's a claims for lots of SaaS companies, because I see lots of you very early in the seats. It's a number of seats. How many people are going to use it? Or it's a matter of capacity, because one of the units that's representative for SaaS startups is actually the size of the storage you're going to have. Then there's the question of the number of features. And it's not only a question about the unit for today, because actually, as Virginie said, today you know that there's a simple issue, you try to solve it. So actually the price conversation is fairly simple. Is it too high? Not enough? How much are you going to be able to pay? And often actually it relates to the budget or the revenue of the company. But the truth is, the unit is also the debate of how you see your company moving forward. Because you're going to do first pricing. Is it going to be big enough or low enough? You never know. But the point is, you're going to try to extend the usage of your tool, and you want the extension of the usage of your tool to be valuable also. This is what we call the upsell. So depending on whether you're priced by a number of features, by a number of people using it, expecting that it's going to be 1 country and then 2 countries of the company, or then the entire headquarters, whether you're going to say you require a lot of storage, there's Salesforce around. If you store documents on the SaaS cloud, you're going to need storage. So that's a unit. So actually, the unit debate is important on the short term, but in the end, on the short term, you're going to figure out something, but also important in understanding what's the product about and what it's going to be about for the next few years.
Yeah, totally agree. And to answer your question on creative pricing, what I've seen recently, not in portfolio companies, but in several companies coming to pitch us, is where traditional incumbents or more mature startup were pricing, for example, for a cut or GMV or a cut of something, they would price a flat fee. So that's something that's quite interesting, because in this case, you would change the perception of how you want to price the customer. And of course, it can be extremely attractive for a customer because it's very predictable and doesn't depend on the level of usage. But it can also be good for the startup, because maybe, you know, a customer that would have not been charged that much would be charged this flat amount that could end up, you know, representing maybe the same average revenue, maybe more, maybe less, but at a psychological cost that is much lower. And I think that I totally agree with all the kind of totally objective and you know, definition of the price, but I think perception is the key in the end. And the value-based approach only works if, one, you can convince the prospect, or even better, is already aware of the way you will reason, and he will be already aware to make the reasoning that you made yourself, or you can explain it quite easily, and that it's quite aligned with the market. You know, because if at some point you're in a market where people, for some reason, price very differently, usually for startup, they face people that charge more, but not often, you will have to be able to explain quite easily why you're pricing more. So I mean, so there is not, what would you do, for example, if you face a market where people are not extracting enough of the value they create? You know, that would be a very difficult stuff, because disrupting, if you don't disrupt the value proposition, so the value creation, it will be very difficult to extract more value from your customer. So I think I totally agree with this, but in practice, what I see is that it's very difficult sometimes to be able to figure out what is even this right theoretical price, or how you would deal with your actual problems that are growth. You know, growth and customer-based growth is a key problem, and sometimes the trade-off, and I guess it's one of the next topics, I hope, is how do you deal in practice with the tension between your growth in terms of, let's say, customer base and the price. And usually there is a curve that is not, 0 is not the best price, but the fairest price might not be the best price to grow quicker. And we're in a competitive world, so I think it's an important question.
That's interesting. So you mean about starting with a price and see how to adapt and modify that price over time? It's like dynamically adapting over time to test different pricing level and see what pricing level gives the better result, meaning that there is an optimal, there should be an optimal somewhere that's at that price level, I get a little bit more customers, I get more value. Higher price means less customer, more value, but the ratio is not good. Something like that.
But I think that there is not one answer per startup. This is a strategy too. You might focus more on something, because there are two tension between, first, you need to price as much as you can to extract as much value that could be on the table, and the other is you need to price lower than that to be able to grow faster, and then be able to raise the price when you will be the leader. Or I mean, so. And I don't know, I mean, if you guys have an idea of generic answer to that, that's fantastic, but I think it's a matter of which market you are in and what is your strategy. I don't think there is one good answer to that.
Okay.
There are a couple of simple sayings. So number one, when you're a seed company, problems start when you start talking about price. When you're a mature company, when you talk about price, the biggest part is over. That's very strange, but that's the first saying. For seed companies, starting talking about price is really trying to figure out your value. And in what I agree with what you said, Boris, is that for seed companies, it's very, very dangerous to fully commit right away to a price, so you need to be very, very iterative with your first partners. It's always hard to admit that you're my first customer or this or that, but there are ways for you to say, okay, let's do first a proof of concept or a witness customer trial, whatever, something that says we're going to try to define the value that you get out of my solution so that on longer term, we can figure something out. When you're a more mature company, when you've passed that stage, normally pricing should just be a corollary of what you've done, and the unit metrics that you define should be just allowing you to define the size and durability of contract and actually be more or less competitive depending on the deal you're faced with. Second thing, in your future customers, in corporate, small, medium, there's one thing they do. It's the make or buy. That's their term for perceived value. If I do this thing, how much is it going to cost me? If I buy it from IBM, how many consultants, internal people, day man, whatever, is it going to take just to make it live? And what's the result? And you're fighting against that because, hey, you're just one click away and then half a day of setup or onboarding, and then that's it, you're it. So you need to be aware of that make or buy, because value is something very evasive. We can talk about our value perceived by customers. It's actually precise and very factual. Number of people, quantity of time spent, IT adaptation to my system. So defining a price, it's actually defining something much bigger than just the couple of features. It's going to be defining the whole impact. Number three, your customers don't understand that they're going to pay for something to reduce the price of something else. That doesn't work. The double budgeting of, well, you're going to add this value here, but there, in the end, you're not going to spend that. That never works because it's just an additional line of budget. So in the end, value definition is key. Pricing at the beginning will allow you just to establish the metrics in a first run into this, but then definitely defining the value is really about taking your customer's perspective rather than your own. I think that's the main point.
And then I don't steal the mic anymore. And here we assume that we already know who the customer is. So I'm following only seed companies, and I think that there is also sometimes a big debate is who is actually our good customers. You know, because I mean here we assume that we already know who the customer is, and so we'll have to understand how much the value is. Often we realize that we have a product, and actually we don't understand exactly who the ideal customer would be in terms of value creation, in terms of ability to price high. And so the pricing discussion, in my opinion, turns out early to be totally mixed with the discussion about what is our offering, who are our prospect customers, you know, and how we position ourselves. Because the same product can be marketed in two ways that would result in an understanding of the value creation that is very different. So all this is not like an objective truth. You have to understand, and all this, in my experience, work together. How I position my product, who is the target customer, what's the price, and all together this is something you iterate until you find at least something that is consistent.
Back to this iteration problem, that's interesting because I was thinking about the problem for companies that have maybe signed like 1-2 deals per month at most, either at the beginning or because you're hunting for large animals like elephants they were talking about. I mean, annual contract value around the 100,000 K. I mean, because you sign 1-2 deals, doing this progressive assessment may take years. I mean, how do you deal with that, Virginie? Because you're selling, I think you're hunting big animals.
Yes, absolutely. But there is one thing I want to add, because we talked about client budgets. So I think this is something that is pretty important, particularly when you are in a new market, right? So when you are in an existing market, clients get budgets, right? So they have a line in their budget that is done for what you are going to address. So that helps you defining a pricing, right? So also you should be careful that there is an approval for budget in a given year that will be that will work for the year after. So having a view of the budget is something that is very important. When you create a new market, the client has no budget, right? So that is a very different exercise from the previous one, that going into an existing market. Back to your question about large deals. So there is no magic. For us, it is pretty easy because we are in an ROI-driven sell. So I would say we are on the easy side, right? So how much value from a money perspective are we providing to our clients? So do we want to provide 2 times ROI, 10 times ROI? Depends upon what you want to do, right? So, and then it will depend upon a geography, as what Boris was saying. You can have a lot of value in a given geography. When you attack the US or another country, they may be much more mature and have a completely different perspective related to your given offering, which may require reviewing your price for this given geography.
I have a question for you, Franck, about removing friction, because we were talking about units, defining the pricing units, pricing on claims or whatever. The thing is that companies like to have a predictable budget, so they like the budget for the year, so which means they want a price that is predictable. And the thing is that sometimes you define a dimensions, like on the number of users, but they don't control the users because they may be end users on the web. And then, which means that you think it's a fair business model because it's really bound to the value that you create. But the thing is that, in fact, they can't foresee the traffic itself, for example. And then we say, okay, I like it, I understand your business, the way you price, but I'm not able to predict what it's going to be, so I cannot budget. So how do you solve that?
It's a balance. It's of course, if you take the customer perspective, for sure they will want to have something highly predictable, and the ideal case would be just a flat fee that will remain stable for the next 10 years. That would be the perfect situation. In truth, you can still have some adaptation, contract review, a change of your price metrics every year. There is still some room for maneuver. The only thing that you should really avoid is to go on the path of the price over engineering. Very often we meet companies that have pushed it far on a far too complex way for the customers. So combining the number of users, number of megabytes, the number of minutes spent with a solution, and then you really need a PhD to know how much you will be charged by the end of the year. So it might be a perfect solution for the very rational part of your brain. And then, as you said, sometimes the customers, they also want to have something maybe less rational, more predictable. So that's where you need to find a balance between the two extremes.
That's funny because it's a little bit like that on AWS or all these cloud-based platforms because you're priced per compute, CPU cycle, storage, bytes on the network, and you never know what it's going to cost. So
and then you have a new entrant entering the market with a simple price structure, and that will wipe out your business.
That's interesting.
So that's where you need to be a bit careful.
Yeah, simple price structure is part of the value proposition, right? It's a value. But I mean, another problem with some unit is that it can create friction to create more usage for your product. Often we see in early definition, you say high price by user. You would have a product that is not viral but it's social. Your interest is that as many users as possible in the company use it, and by pricing by user, maybe in the long term you would extract the value, but you create friction to extension of the usage, and that's something that's a tension that we see in many companies at seed stage, where actually it will be the most logical in terms of value creation, but not in terms of intra-company expansion.
That's interesting.
And another comment I'd like to make on the previous intervention is that we are very focused on enterprise, but I think that many things we've said are not so true for SMBs. For example, having already a budget and wanting a lot of stability and so on. I think many SMBs don't have a budget yet for the things they are looking for. It might not be as easy as the kind of shift to quantify the ROI, and being something more variable might be an advantage because it means I will pay less now and I don't care paying more later because it means I will still be there if I'm a startup and I will have grown. So I think that just to
Okay. Can you raise price over time if you get it wrong the first time? Is it easy or not? I mean, okay, I say, okay, the price tag is 1,000 per month or whatever, and say, oh, no, that was not enough, and then I make it 2,000 per month. How easy is that?
So it's the Chinese myth. You know, first I wipe out the competition, and then I'm the king. So there you go.
That was the idea of the question. Yeah.
And then, as Frank says, somebody else comes and says, you know what, I'm going to make it cheap. So personally, I don't believe that you can raise price per se. Like, sorry, I've been like billing you for 2 years, 2,000, and now it's 4,000. Life's a bitch. I don't believe in that at all. I believe in extension of dependency and collaboration, meaning you've been using that product for a while, and we understand we need to find ways to extend the reach of the solution, which is always an issue for software companies. You get a roadmap because you hit something with your customer, but if you don't evolve, somebody else is going to do it for cheaper, for better. So there are two corollaries. You need to have your product evolving to satisfy your customer. This evolution is what's going to allow you to extend the value perception. So it's not about how do I move from 2,000 to 4,000. It's about how do I extend the reach of my solution? How do I bring additional features? How do I make it live? Because first of all, if it doesn't live, somebody else is going to come. But more importantly, once you're at a customer and they've been there for 2 years, that means they depend on you. So you've got a great opportunity to do more for the customer, to bring more, and that's how you change the price. And by the way, on the side note, so moving back to the debate we were having about the first value, in the first debates we have on value, there's always a fear that, oh, I'm going to be too expensive. I'm supposed to be very disruptive, so let's be aggressive on price. If you have something nice and disruptive, it's expensive because you're bringing value. It's okay to start from higher. It's always easier to reduce price. I don't know many people, Virginie, you can try, I hope you'll be able to do that, who have increased price over time. So really, it's about, and hence moving back to the roadmap of product, because it relates to the value you're building and the value you intend to build for your customer, to the debate you're having with the customer who allows you to build that roadmap, but also to the various dimensions that you're going to bring to your solution. We're talking about number of seats. Is it a good metric? Is it a limitative metric? In the future, usage of more features, usage of relating the price to the revenue that you generate, this and that. There will be many ideas. In the end, it's more about what you'll bring in addition to what you're initially bringing.
Yeah, of Of course, I agree with that. It's a matter of give to get. It's the same decreasing the price or increasing the price. You must justify it in the discussion with the client, right? So if the client gives me something additional, it might be depending upon my strategy, becoming a reference or paying everything upfront. So then I can give a discount because it makes sense to my strategy, right? On the other hand, if the client asks me to raise my SLAs, for example, it makes absolute sense to raise the price, right?
I don't agree with this when it's early. In an early company, I mean, here when you're established company with an established customer base, it's very hard, which makes it further important to have the good price, because here you mentioned the case where the justification for price will be more value, but what if you totally underestimated in your first years of life the level of value you're creating, that your price is off by 10x? Let's say, I'm exaggerating. In this case, I think that's very hard, but very early at companies, we are able to change price, hopefully. I mean, when you have not yet established and that people don't talk too much to each other, or even, and people can understand, I think the more you mature, the more you see clarity on price, but the more any mistake that would have been crystallized would be harder to fix, I guess.
I agree, but...
But you don't.
Yeah, no.
He's a very polite...
I agree, but no, I've seen that actually. I had a conversation with a company this morning about that, but you need to admit that you're going to go back to your customer and say, okay, so I have an issue. I'm giving you this great solution. It's just the pricing is entirely wrong, so I got to be honest with you. We need to redefine the pricing. The truth is, this debate is possible. I believe in that. But you need to be ready for the idea that you're starting from scratch, that they might hang up. And on the opposite side, that other customers might be like, oh, I heard you were doing that price before. I want it again. So it's possible. The younger, the better. The older, the more difficult. But you're starting.
Yeah, but if you're young, you have a small customer base, and usually you can afford to let the former price with those ones.
Yeah, I think there are two things. There is a generic increase in price, and there is a one-on-one discussion with the client, which is completely different.
Okay, that's interesting, because here we were looking at the one company alone in its world, but it's not Disneyland. I mean, you have competitors, you have newcomers. How do you react when you're attacked on your price? Let's say that there's a new company coming with a product that is similar to yours, maybe better, maybe lesser, doesn't care, just coming on the market, or just because the market is shifting, some technologies has become a commodity, and because of this commoditization of the market, pricing are going down. We've seen people like packaging open source technology, for example, okay? Like take an open source technology, package it, sell service, like Elasticsearch, for example. It's just packaging of technology. So we were in the search market, so we know that well. And people just invest in packaging and marketing technology, and then they can just lower the price a lot. How do you react? Do you react to that as a company? Do you lower your price as well?
So I think when it happens, it sucks, right? I mean,
totally.
first thing,
we have to pivot.
And I think that's something, as VC, we're very sensitive to, I think, because now you can have a dumber competitor or less good competitor in terms of product and whatever, raise 100 million and just flood the market. That's totally possible. In this case, I think you must be honest, you're in deep, deep troubles, because all this conversation doesn't hold anymore. If yes, the theoretical good price would be 1,000, but someone for some reason is willing to offer for 200, I'm not sure you have. If you have a differentiated product that is unique, yes, but here we're assuming that you might have several vendors that offer more or less the same solution. In this case, I think that you will probably die. I guess, I don't know, but if the guy raised a lot of money already, having a direct competitor in the same geography raising a lot of money is never good news, but if he's attacking on price, I think I don't have a solution for you guys. No, I think so. That's also
run.
No, that's the limit. No. But that's the limit of all this conversation, in my opinion, is that when it happens, it's very complicated.
So we've been faced with a situation at Shift. On the shorter term, at some point, you need to be also confident about your value. There will be people raising money or not, coming to your customers and offering lower prices because they got nothing else. And at some point, you need to be able to engage a conversation. You need to be able to bring it back to value. We talked a lot about value. So at some point, you need to be able to perceive with your customer if it's really a cost-driven play. In such case, you know what? Sometimes the quality doesn't matter. Or if it's a quality-driven play, in such case, you need to bring it back to the point which is, this is the price we're agreed upon. We still believe we're going to bring you much better value out of this. And even in one case, we've had to say, you know what? Fine, go with the other guy. Let's talk in a year.
But I want to respectfully disagree, just 10 seconds. It's a explainer from a rich person, not rich in the sense of he has a lot of money, but he has a great portfolio. So a lot of companies that create unique value. The truth for many companies is that they don't create unique value. So price is a big component, and you can afford to say, you know what, I'm 3x more expensive, but I bring more value. If you have someone that is doing dumping on price, I mean, I don't know, for example, in the fintech market, I know a lot of operators operate at gross margin that are negative. I mean, even losing, not even on operational costs, losing their COGS, the cost of operating the transaction is more than the price. In this case, if someone is doing that, you don't have any more choice than either creating something much more disruptive or finding the money to be able to operate in the same condition. So I think your explanation is valid for 1% of the top companies, in my opinion, not for the 99%. That's it's very good news. He can't even envision that, so he only follows great companies, and I think it's not a joke. I think it's true. So congrats. I don't have the same problem.
Moving back to your point, if this is a losing money market, if this is a play against value, at some point there's a strategic question for the company. Do I want to?
I would love to invest in Revolut. I would love to have invested in Revolut. Huh?
Yeah, but so the point is, you're right. But so at some point, okay, everybody's dumping their prices. What do you do? Is it a good
that's my question. That's my question. How do you act for pricing in a dumb market? I don't have the solution.
Frank, you've seen companies like that. You've helped companies redefine a bit of their strategy facing this situation.
Yeah, we have helped a couple of companies that are apparently surrounded by very dumb competitors, just dropping the price like maniacs. And actually, the only thing that you can do in a price war, where you know that nobody can actually win, is try to survive. And there,
raise more money.
One of the things that you can do is to create a versioning of your solutions. So, do you have a fighting solution or fighting product on which you can drop the price, a medium product and a premium product? Not every single customer will want to buy the cheap solution. So again, understanding the value and maybe making differentiated offers can be one way, at least, to minimize the impact of the stupid competitors.
Yeah, but that's where I disagree totally. I don't assume that the competitor is stupid. I assume that he's more aggressive and better funded. If you have a stupid competitor offering less value, I understand the strategy. I'm speaking about what we'll see more and more, I guess, with the mega rounds being raised. A smart competitor that has an aggressive and destructive pricing strategy just to grab the market.
That would be also assuming that they have stupid shareholders, and that's that would accept to destroy the long-term value of the segment. And I would be surprised that the shareholders would support this strategy on the long term, at least.
Boris, everything's possible. Of course, suddenly, right now, we're seeing mega rounds and people are dropping prices. But the truth is, who's there on the long run? Again, it's a long play. We know that.
It's a long play, you're right.
For a while. I've been there for 20 years. For 20 years, you see suddenly prices drop. I've done business with Chinese. They come, they go. The difficulty sometimes is not to go overspend to regain your customers. Is to say, okay, we're dealing with a hard market. So one of the answers to your question is not, oh, I got a great portfolio. We all have the same portfolio of companies that's going to suffer for these prices. The point is, we have reserves of money. Do we focus on value-generating customers? Do we move back to perhaps another product or a redefined product with lower features? But the truth is, when we enter this debate, it's usually a mature market debate. The moment where somebody else comes and disrupts your prices, normally it's the companies around this table who do that, and we're like, hey, got you, and made money around it. The problem is, when it happens to your own company, either you're in a mature market, and sometimes, well, it's a sign that growth is not there anymore, or it's a value dumping market. Brace, just brace.
Okay, so let's move on, because very good subject. That was a good question, obviously. But I got two more questions. So one advice we gave, and we've been hearing since the beginning of this day, is, guys, go global rapidly. So go global means sell everywhere in different currencies. Is that the same price everywhere? I mean, it's like same price for the entire world, or it's like you're working on the Big Mac index? You apply the Big Mac index ratio on your product?
Okay, so I can give the example of Shift. We have 8 offices across the world, of which in Japan, in the US. So I think there are two things. There is the value and there is the pricing model. You see that in some countries, they are sensitive to some pricing model which are different from ours. For example, here we began with a pay-as-you-use model. In Japan, it doesn't make any sense. They engage on 6 years, 7 years, 9 years. So they are expecting to get a fixed price for a given value, volume, value, number of years, right? So that's the first point. You need to understand what's the market culture. In terms of value of the price, we made the decision to go for the same price everywhere. So far it works because we don't have competitors that are strong in the markets where we are so far. Is it the right approach? We don't know yet. This is too early, but at the beginning, in order to be simple and because we get a large number of corporate clients in our industry, we thought it was more simple for us and for them to get the same price everywhere. Of course, we apply the Bloomberg index and so on, but
something like that. Okay, but something very similar, but it's really correlated to your insurance industry that you're working on.
Yes,
okay.
exactly.
But
which is very specific.
But if you sell B2B, maybe selling like around 1,000 per month or something like that to SMBs or different companies, this 1,000 per month that would work, let's say in euro. Maybe should that be 3,000 in the US because that's the US and 4,000 in Japan because it's Japan, but also 200 in India. Does that work like that? Does it, or is it a problem because people may notice that the price and they'd like to pay you with rupee in India to buy the same product from the US?
I think it comes down to the type of products and market you're addressing. We're investors in Mailjet. Judy presented GDPR, and so on Mailjet, the mail market is already global. So actually, it's more about a global unit of pricing, and that's the point of SaaS. We're being in a SaaS conference. SaaS tends to be globalizing prices because people are going to be driven by your marketing. If you enter more higher accounts, which is what you described earlier, Boris, in these cases, yeah, if you're in industries where you're dealing with customers asking you for a certain duration of time, for a certain way of engaging, we're in Japan now with the Shift, which has totally different ways of engaging than people in the US, for example, then you're going to build packages and prices that are slightly different because of the value perceived, because they're asking you to engage in a certain way over a certain amount of time, and that will definitely generate diversity in regions, but that do not impact the perception of price, because this is really, again, moving back to one-to-one negotiation. SaaS, as a point, probably 80 to 90% of the in the room, this is something that you're going to access online. That's going to be a cloud product, so that's going to tend to be quite homogeneous, I think.
Okay. Yep. One question then. Okay, last question. Okay, let's say that you know the right price. How do you apply that in your more day-to-day strategy? I mean, like, you know that the good price for selling is 100, whatever. Do you put the public-facing price, you make it 150 because you want to give room for people to negotiate, or do you say the price is 100, I announce 100, and I don't allow almost any rebate at all? I mean, that's more tactic than strategic. But still, that's something that you're facing, because when you announce the price, at some point procurement goes in and says, okay, guys, my role to buy, and I want this 30% discount. And it's just procurement, they don't care. You see what I mean? It's like, do you foresee that and you have to put that margin in the price that you announce to anticipate the rebate you'll be asked for? Or do you say, no, sorry, that's the price, is the price, sorry, I don't negotiate, or I give you 1%, okay. I mean, you have to make decision. I mean, when you're selling. So,
in the case of Shift, we have one price, and we have room for discussion depending upon what the client gives us, right? So again, if the client is committing on 3 years on a volume of claims that is that level, if he gives us, if he becomes a reference, if he pays us upfront, then the risk is not the same for us, right? I like at some point to speak with the client about industrial risk, right? In a pay-as-you-use mode, the risk is 100% on us. This has a cost for them, right? So the game is potentially to transfer the risk a little bit to the client, and of course we are ready to give back some money for that, right? So that's
okay, that's interesting because it means that you don't give really rebates, you just trade. Like you give a discount for something that you trade against. Like always ask for something in exchange, but don't just give raw rebate or you lose face and people may lose confidence in what you say.
Exactly.
That's the idea. So it's more like have a price, maybe allow you 10, 15% discount against something, always against. Okay, yeah. That's good advice. You should do like that. I think it's time. So guys, thank you for this half an hour discussion. Very interesting. Thank you very much.